Well, let's just get into it.
All right. All right. Let's get into it.
So basically, I guess the first thing to get into is what's the purpose of the podcast and what we're trying to build.
Right.
Right. And
That was bad timing.
it's
That was bad timing.
all good. That's why we can edit.
What to do now? Stir. Yeah.
So,
The purpose.
The purpose and mission of what we're trying to do.
Yeah.
Why the podcast? Well, we need to get into the why, but the purpose on both ends.
Yeah.
The purpose of for us and for the people listening.
Yeah.
Basically.
Okay. For my purpose of doing this podcast is like, I think it's a spiritual calling. You know what I'm saying? And I think it's something I'm passionate about. And spiritual calling for me is like knowing that like I see masculinity being like endangered, like it's like an endangerment. You know, I'm not saying it's gonna be existent. You know.
Right, or it's gonna be out of existence.
Yeah. So it just needs to be, like we talked about prior, is like a therapy, you know, like a rehab. So and that's a calling to knowing that like we kind of see the future, and you kind of see where something is headed, and it's headed in the wrong direction. And I think it's like something you gotta take by the horns and make sure you guide it back into the, you know, the place where it needs to be. The place where it needs to be, it needs to be in a community of men and not letting society take control of it.
Right.
So that's one of my purposes of the podcast, is just making sure that like I'm able to touch and reach out to many men as I can, and just sharing all different types of masculinity, because it all comes from all different walks of life. Every day and every experience that a man goes through, there's some experience that can be shared. Even for myself, you know, somebody can shine something a little bit light on me, as far as how masculinity is, how it's developed, how it's worn, you know, when it's displayed, and so forth. So it's something to where like it's a calling that you have to, you know, you got to come forth and see the calling, see the light.
Right.
You got to come forth and see the light of that. And what about you?
Well, I mean, we're very similar, and I think what the purpose is on this, hence why we're joining forces on the whole thing.
Yeah.
But to add to what you said, like the purpose behind it, wake people up. And I think mostly wake men up to start taking responsibility and being accountable for what they should be doing in order to make sure masculinity is present in today's society, and also to keep it from, well, in my opinion, deteriorating society, or the lack thereof.
Right.
And it's bringing light to the idea that there's no such thing as toxic masculinity. There's toxic behavior on both sides of feminine and the masculine, but neither is actually feminine or masculine.
Right.
That's just toxic behavior that anyone who's not stepping into divine masculine can have.
Right.
Right. So I think that's one of the biggest purposes in bringing men back into the forefront of whatever their mission is.
Okay. Yeah.
And figuring that out, because that's how they're going to be the contributors to society or the community in a way that's actually going to be helpful for the betterment of everyone.
Right.
Protecting the innocent, you know, the ones that can't defend themselves, and innovation.
Yeah.
That ambition, bring that back into being. Hey, it's okay to be ambitious. It's okay to be able to defend yourself. It's okay to make money. It's okay to use it to help other people.
Right.
All that stuff.
Right.
That I think has been lost in society, and turned more men into being just people that have become so focused on just what they feel. And accepting the fact that if you feel it, then it must be true, when in reality that's not true.
Yeah.
So, if that makes any sense.
We stay away, we'll stay away from how we feel. Stay away from how you
Well,
feel.
I mean, we need to understand and what the feelings mean, but don't let the feelings be the determining factor in how you make decisions.
Yes. Yeah.
Right? In my opinion.
Right.
Maybe I'm wrong on that, but I feel like, I think from looking at things, and you can help me see what, like your perspective on it, is that whenever we allow the feelings to take too much control, we end up becoming very chaotic and things just turn into a mess.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I believe that. And I also too, I think the whole feeling thing, I think it's part of the process, how you process information.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if you can, put the feelings aside and just focus on processing the information, processing what is taking place, so you can make the right decision. I think that needs to be something that's it's like an exercise.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So where you're leaving the feelings out, and you focus on processing information, and it means that like what are the consequences, being held accountable. Because I think that we don't do that. We do just act on feeling, and we all can be a part of that in some sense of life. You know what I'm saying? So it's an exercise that needs to be taking place, and you need to have some type of awareness. That's what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
You need to be aware. Like, am I reacting to my feelings, or am I reacting to the information process that was given to me? I think we need to know the difference.
Right. That's good. Yep, I agree. So I think that's a good enough of an introduction as to what we're doing, right?
Yeah.
I think one thing I'd like to share before we move into the actual topic of what we want to talk about is, this is all designed around, I think, if I could share this, the 4 areas I feel like are important to help man become masculine again.
Yeah.
And I think I wrote it down on my phone, but it's recorded right now.
That's okay.
From last night, remember?
Yeah.
And that was becoming physically strong.
Yeah.
Right. So that way they could protect themselves and things that they value.
Yeah.
Emotionally vulnerable.
Yeah.
And aware. Mentally acute and sharp.
Mm-hmm.
And then spiritually awakened. Right.
Yeah.
Those 4 areas is, I think, what we're trying to develop within men in their masculine frame through this. And I think the first area where we start that, because you asked me last night, like where is it the beginning? Like if you take a beginner in it, trying to develop masculinity, what is that step?
Right.
And I'll let you share.
And then what we agreed on was the word, right? Like your word is your honor.
Right.
And I think that starts at a young age, and I think that at that age it's something to where you have to know that like it's going to be something to where you can't take lightly. You have to be held accountable for saying that if you're going to do something, you got to do it. And if you're going to be there, you got to be there. And then I think one thing too that I think I was thinking about with the whole your word is your honor. There's some days that like, or some situations you may have to break that, and I think it's fair enough to communicate maturely how you break that. Like, okay, I know I said I was going to do this, but this scenario came up, X, Y, Z, I can't make it. And I think it's mature enough to face those things head on, versus leaving someone kind of like high and dry, or you dismiss somebody else's time. Because like I think that's something we all value is time. And at a young age too, you don't really know what time is. So there's a lot of things that like we can play with when it comes to masculinity, and saying that like your word is your honor. And that's one thing I want to play with as far as letting people know that, or letting men know that, hey, this is your word. This is the start of the beginning. This is the start of the chapter to masculinity is your word. So this is where we start. Now, how do we continue to get there? How you continue to build off that? Those comes with your commitment, following through, and knowing that, like you say, it's more of a spiritual awakening, because you're inviting people into your life, and you need to make sure you invite the right people in your life that know how to hold up and be held accountable for what they say. And I think that's huge.
It's almost like what we were talking about the other night when it comes to the idea of your word is your honor. It's almost like a rite of passage you have to go through.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like in today's society where it's been lacking and why we don't really have that development, like because you told me yesterday, masculinity is something you build.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Right. It's not something you just get by happenstance. You have to go through actual experiences and decisions and development in order to actually have masculinity.
Right.
Or at least let that masculinity that you feel within your heart come out. And part of the thing I feel that's been missing in today's society and why I think men aren't as masculine is we don't really have a rite of passage anymore.
Yeah.
Right? Back in the day when you had people that lived in less sophisticated times, right, where it was more based upon survival, you had a literal moment you had to go through where it's transitioned you from boyhood to manhood.
Mm-hmm.
I know there were tribes that used to take their son when he would hit 13 years old, right? They'd take him out to an area and almost paste him to a wall. I don't know what they used, but it's almost like some sort of clay or whatever that would hold them to. If you read the book King, Warrior, Magician, Lover, it talks about it.
Okay.
And they literally clay paste him to the side of a mountain or hill somewhere, and then ants and other insects would come and crawl all over him throughout the night, biting him, whatever. Would never kill him, but it would feel like he could possibly die.
Right.
And how he would prove himself or the rite of passage is being able to make it through the night.
Yeah.
Without calling for someone to get him out, so he didn't have to deal with that suffering.
Yeah.
And if he made it through the night, he now became a man.
Right.
Right. And I feel like we just don't have that anymore.
Mm-hmm.
We're not willing to test ourselves or test our young men anymore to show them, hey, reality is being a man is not easy. It's suffering.
Yeah.
It sucks.
Mm-hmm. It
You know, we're going through the refiner's fire. It's constantly nothing but a test to the day you die.
Right.
And the way to instill that into them is teach them, look, if you're going to say you're going to do this, prove it.
Right.
Are you going to be a man of your word? And that's that very first thing right there, that rite of passage saying, I'm going to do this, I'm going to stick with it, and then let's see, prove it.
Right.
Because if you do so, you have my respect, and therefore I view you as being a man.
Right.
Right? And we don't have it anymore.
Right. No, we don't.
You know? And I think that's a big issue.
Yeah. And I think that's part of the going back to the mission is that we don't have that. But now my question is, how do we build that to have it?
Almost like a rite of passage.
Mm-hmm. How do you build that passage? I know it's the word,
Right.
but after the word, what's next?
That's a good question. What do you think?
I do believe it's some.
I mean, I got some ideas, but I want to hear.
I do believe it's going to be based on some type of physical experience. That physical experience I don't know, but I think it's a physical limitation. Like how far do you push?
Touching how far you can go on a physical scale.
Yes, yeah. Because pain is suffering.
Yeah.
But pain is also joy. Because if you can endure pain, that's what's going to bring you joy.
That's what I was saying. You can't have one without the other, right?
Yes.
You can't have pain without joy, or joy without sorrow.
Yes.
Right.
So
Sadness with happiness, and such and such.
Yeah.
No, that makes sense. I do think, definitely there has to be some sort of physical testing.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I'm glad. That's why I think sports can be a good aspect of that.
Right.
Like you've been through, played football. I've been in martial arts. It started at a young age. I think a lot of that thing can be a part of a rite of passage because one, it teaches you to be true to your word,
Right.
which means are you disciplined?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Do you have discipline built up within you to stick with what you know you should do, even when you don't want to?
Even when you don't want to.
Right? And that's all part of being a man.
Yeah.
Doing it regardless of how you feel.
Right.
Because there's something bigger at play here versus just your poor little feelings.
Yeah. Right. Okay. Yeah.
So maybe it's something like that, you know, a rite of passage could be not only just your word being tested and saying you're gonna do something and do it, but going through a physical limitation that truly tests your word.
Right.
Because you don't really know. It's easy to sit here and say, yeah, I can do that.
Yeah.
Well, you've never done it before,
Yeah.
and you don't really know until you get tested by it, until it makes you
Right.
want to freaking collapse.
Yeah.
Like, everyone thinks it's cool to be a Navy SEAL until you actually go try out to be a Navy SEAL and they realize, oh man, this fucking sucks.
Yeah. Ring the
I
bell.
don't want to do it.
Yeah.
I quit.
Yeah. Gotta
So
ring that
that's
bell.
where you're tested. So yeah, and that's probably how you actually test someone's literal word.
Okay.
Right? Literally
Yeah.
going through a physical experience that tests one's integrity to their commitment or their commitment level to the idea.
And that's also a way of gaining respect too.
Right. For yourself.
Yeah, for yourself, exactly. You should definitely have that for yourself. Is knowing that like you came out, you went through the fire, you know, and going through the fire definitely takes a lot of like pain and endurance because you don't know if you're able to go so far, and you only you know those limitations, you know. So, and then once you get through, you have like a you have that community of people who's there, kind of pushing you and holding you accountable and cheering you on. And that's one thing we need to have a little bit more is knowing that like we're going to push this younger generation, letting these guys know that it's okay to be masculine. Like, don't think about what society is saying, toxic masculinity, and that's going back to what you were saying. It's behavior on both sides.
Right.
So we have to let the younger generation know that like this is masculine, this is what masculine looks like, and this is what you need to go through. And that's something I like to make sure that we spread that message to the younger generation.
Yeah. You know, I think that's part of why we're doing this too, right? Is hopefully, I mean, who knows what will come from it? The objective is hopefully you can penetrate the hearts of people that will cause them to change.
Yeah, yeah. So, and then the rite of passage, that's that's part of like this whole masculinity is like it's a recipe. You know, we got to make sure we put all the ingredients in. So your word is your honor. The rite of passage, some type of physical experience that you testing, testing. And then the next is like just make sure that like it's like having the black belt of some martial arts, knowing that you can beat somebody's ass, but you don't go out there, just beating up on anybody.
Right.
So what I'm saying is like now you're building up these skills, but you need to go out to the world and display that you have this masculinity.
Right.
But you don't go out there just beating up people just for no reason, So
your ego, right? You're not
Yeah.
going out there to satisfy some ego and make yourself look like you're a badass or tough, which just makes you a bully and not really tough.
Right, and I think we need to address that part too. I think that there's some I guess you would say, what is the word? There's just some people out there that think that that's related to masculinity. It's like the whole bullying and the arrogance and the ego. Like that's not what that's about. That's not the masculinity we are trying to portray.
Well, that's not real masculinity anyway. I believe that's part of the toxic behavior.
Yeah.
But masculine, no, because a masculine is not someone who goes out just to pick and bully and I don't know, to satisfy one's ego.
Right.
Masculine is actually more, it's bravery and courage because it's about facing things that are actually threatening to you and the things that you value and love.
Right.
Like, the more masculine type would be the one going out who sees a bully picking on someone that's really not doing anything wrong that gets in there.
Yeah.
And puts him in his place.
Right.
Or is able to deter it and then helps the other one, hey man, the best way to deal with someone that's threatening you and trying to bully you is face the fear, face it, show them that you're not afraid.
Right.
If it needs be, you duke it out and he leaves you alone after so, then that's showing that you respect and you're not willing to tolerate. You have a spine.
Right.
Right? You're not a wimp, a doormat.
Yeah.
That would be more of a masculine, I would say, feature or behavior than beating the crap out of someone just to beat the crap out of someone.
Right. So yeah. Okay. All right. What we got next?
Well, I think, we've touched on, I think, the first part of masculinity.
First part of it, yeah.
Yeah, so far, and I think the next thing after, you know, obviously understanding that your word is your honor, and then in order to keep your word, you have to go through some physical process that proves whether or not you truly mean what you say, and that, and there develops self-respect, which is the most important of all, and then the respect of others.
Yeah.
The next process, I think, in building masculinity is maybe that's what we could talk about in the next next session.
Yeah, right.
And that might have to do something with it could be having to learn how to defend oneself. For that, the physical protective aspect, to be able to protect and provide.
Yeah.
I think is the next thing.
All right.
Honestly, protect. What does that mean? And is that lost in today's society, or is that just, and is it just an ancient idea from the past that is no longer needed?
Yeah.
Because in today's society, what do they say? It was like, well, men and women are the same, right?
Yeah. But are we really?
But are we really?
No.
Right?
Especially when it comes
to
my opinion, we're not.
Right. I don't think so either, but I think that could be a good conversation for a whole podcast, single episode, maybe, right?
Yeah.
Unless you want to get into that now.
Okay. No, we can say that.
I think that'd be,
for the
because
next
we could talk about that. What does that look like in a society without it? If men and women are the same, you know, what does that do when it comes to the protector and provider side of the masculine frame within a man? And then, are we really the same? Which I know both of you and I don't believe we are.
Right.
But that doesn't make one more superior or less than another. Maybe in certain realms, maybe in the physical realm, men are superior.
Yeah.
Obviously.
Right.
More power and strength.
Right.
And on the more loving and nurturing realm, women might be more superior, because that's they give birth and hold a child within the womb for 9 months, so they kind of have to be.
Yeah.
There's more of a real literal connection. It literally is a part of them.
Right. Okay.
And it's part of us too, but it's not the same. But we can get into that.
Okay. Yeah.
I think the next time.
All right. Yeah. I'm down.
All right.
Yeah.
So we call it good for this one?
I think so. I think that's
right.
good. That's good enough,
All right.
man. You know.
Works for me.